to day 19 of this 30-day challenge with James Olokesusi, wealth transformational exposure. Oh, fantastic, fantastic. Yesterday, we so severely, so seriously with, the poverty mindsets, versus the wealthy mindset. We've been dealing with all of those stuff. And several other business, we've talked about business model, we've talked about, as much as we continue to do this, those people, you can watch us in that. So as much as we're going to do this, I believe that we can do a lot. We can do a lot. So today I'll be talking about the lies about capital. The lies about capital, the lies they've told you about capital. All those lies, we want to really demystify it. We want to really let you understand that capital, is what determines the business. Because what determines the success of every business is capital. Because no matter how best the idea is, when there's no capital, the idea is best as just written in the book. So a capital is what translates the idea into a reality, makes it to become a scalable, that scales the operation and allows it to grow, that sustains the growth. So capital is so important in the business, is so important because, a lot of times, we're speaking to some business folks today. They said, no, we need capital. Capital is all we need. So I was talking to them concerning, and that was why I'm even talking about capital today, because we spoke with so many business people today as we are preparing for our program on Friday. A lot of them said, we tried to sample their opinion, and all of them were talking about capital. So sometimes we have been so wrongly indoctrinated about if you have an opinion in the comment section, what is capital? Okay, let me just give you this. Capital is a resource. Capital is a resource. That resource can be money, it can be assets, it can be human abilities. You can see, I'm trying to really break this down now. Capital itself is a resource. It can be money, it can be assets like machineries and lots of that. I'm going to explain all of that later. And it can be human ability itself. So you can see three of such that helps to, that is deployed to generate wealth, that is deployed to create wealth. You can see capital is a resource. It can be money, it can be assets, it can be human ability that you can deploy, that we can really release, we can use to create wealth. We have the factors of labor, we have the land, we have the capital, we have the human, so these are factors, and capital cuts across all of these things. It cuts across the land, it cuts across human capital, it cuts across labor and finances. So what are those things that which areas, which levels of capital, different areas where the capital comes from, or different areas of capital. I'm going to talk about different areas of capital, because I'm going to talk about, continue tomorrow to come and make to realize that all that we need for capital is just money. And that's a lie. That's a lie. All you need is not just money. Because you can have a lot of money, and without the technical know-how, your business will still collapse. There's a scripture that's Olokesusi 10 verse 15. He said, the labor of the foolish wearieth every one of them, because they know not how. They do not know how to go to the city. They lack the technical know-how. So a lot of business owners are failing because they lack the technical know-how. Most of the times when we talk about technical know-how, we think the only know-how is about the skill of operation. No, what about the organization of the business? What about the understanding having financial intelligence? What about leadership? What about entrepreneurial abilities? So it's encompassing all of these things. So now let's look at the areas of capital. Number one, let's look at financial capital. We know that financial capital has to do with money. It can be your back profits, it can be your loan, it can be your savings, it can be an investor's fund. It has to do with money. That's financial capital. That's amount put into business to go and to start the capital, to start operation, to start whatever, what have you. That's the financial capital. But this is a lot of us. This is the only thing we know. Each time we mention capital, the only thing that comes to our mind is money, and that's a lie. Capital is not just money, and it's not always about money. That's it. That's a challenge with a lot of business people. And now let's look at another area of capital. If we look at capital, we can look at physical capital. You can look at physical capital, also do with machineries. It can do with assets. It can do like a space of office. It can be like machineries. It can be yes, machineries. It can be things that equipment that can be used to run operation. That's a capital on its own. See, all you need is what you need. Sometimes it's not what you need is money, because we focus our mind on money. A friend of mine, he runs a business, and in a very eyebrow of Lagos State, somebody gave me a fantastic office space. I was there. I was wow, wow, wow. Very beautiful place. Very beautiful. He will have spent millions and millions and millions to acquire that place, but somebody gave it to him. That's a capital on its own. That's a physical capital. Physical, for you to have your office in a highbrow of Lagos, and somebody gave that to him. So that's it. Sometimes we think when we talk to people about money, about capital, we're just talking about money and lots of that. Sometimes people might be willing to even give their car to support you, in terms not just giving you to borrow you, that okay, use this one to run these things, or probably they have certain equipment they can use to assist you. Probably they can use, but since you have talked to them, all that you need is money. Sometimes we need to break down all that we need. Then we begin to look at what actually is all that I need. Is it just money? So that's what about physical capital. The third one I look at is human capital. Here we understand when we talk about human capital, we're talking about skill, we're talking about knowledge, we talk about experience, such experience that can drive value. So that's somebody understand the skill of operation, skill of how to run a business, skill, different area of skill, human capital. Because sometimes we play down on the skill, or we downplay the role of the skill, and not really actually understanding that there are a lot of businesses that you can use a skill to crowdfund by using your skill to design a prototype. So sometimes we say, oh, we need a whole lot of money. Probably just get a small money and use your skill to get a prototype, just like Tesla did. Elon Musk just did a prototype or design. These are the things we are trying to work on, and like that. And you crowdfund, get a product before even production, show the people, and they put money, and you're able to produce. Just like we're going to talk about that a lot about that tomorrow under alternative to capital. But this is what we're talking about: human skill, human ability, human capital, the skill itself. Like a fashion designer that wants to start a fashion house, or want to start a fashion business, you can begin to take up contracts first with your skill. From there, with money you are making, you are able, probably you are doing this as a stylist, working as a stylist. You might be a freelance stylist. Not that you're just working under somebody, or you might be working under somebody using your skill to raise money, then begin to build what you want to do, and the likes of that. So the skill is so important. Or you might have somebody who is going to come and work with you and bringing a skill, human capital to you. Okay, you're going to work with somebody, you're starting a business, you don't have the capital to get an accountant, and somebody says, okay, I'm going to work with you as an accountant, and that's going to be my own capital that will contribute to, as we call it, sweat equity, that is going to contribute to your business. See, I'm going to talk so much in that sweat equity and a lot of stuff under the alternative to capital. So, but human capital is about the skill. Your know-how, the skill of the business, the skill of operations, the skill of leadership, the skill of entrepreneurship, the skill to even negotiate. The skill to negotiate itself is a skill, the skill of marketing. The skill of marketing, so human capital is there. Human capital is there. Sometimes you need so much of an equipment to buy, but because You have the skill to operate it. So we talk about that human capital. So another we can talk about is we call it relationship capital. Yes, relationship capital. This is has to do. Oh, we call it. You can call it social capital. Yes, social capital. This it has to do with you using your relationship or networks to open doors to partnership, doors to investors, doors to clients. That's the capital on its own. Relationship, social capital is so important as well. You might not even have a couple, but social capital can open doors for you to connect you to capital. We're working in recently, and we're working on an app, to run some very an idea of mine that came to my mind, and we're working on it. And while we're thinking about it, it's going to run into a lot of millions and lakhs of that to produce. I begin to speak with IU UX developers, different developers, back front and back end developers, and we begin to speak a lot of things. We begin to run, estimate how much will be needed and lakhs of that. Then I spoke to a friend of mine, and a friend of mine spoke to his friend of his, and coming together, we begin to have meetings, and as they will invest into that idea, look at how it works. I didn't have to spend anything. All I need is just a social capital that can open doors for me to um, partners, to investors, to so that's it. So because that's why a lot of people all it is, oh, I need money, I need money. I was talking to them, I need money. So you see, there is a social capital. Who do you know? Sometimes who you know is more important than what you know. What do you know? That can that you can pitch your ideas to. You can show the value of your ideas. That's people. It can introduce you to some people who can invest into it. That's why you see the sons of the or the children of the wealthy people or rich men. That's why they get it easy. Somebody said something. He said, when you say opportunity comes but once, it's for the children of the poor, not for the children of the rich, because they can keep getting opportunity over and over and over again. So who do you know? It's a social capital. That's why sometimes you went to school with some friends, and that's why we encourage the young people when you get to school, make friends with right people from good homes. Make friends, even in youth service, make friends with right people because you might need their connection soon. You might need their connection very soon because when you are starting a business, that was what Injoku did. You know, the Injoku, the owner of Rock TV. That's how what that guy did. He went to Stafford University, in UK, and met his friend Sebastian, and they went to school together. When he was to start, he needed about $50,000 or 150. I can't remember how much that is now. So he needed some money, and he spoke to Sebastian, a German, I think, and they spoke about it, and the guy, invested. Look at it. The company now is Rock TV is worth about $40 million today because he has the social capital. He had the idea, but he leveraged on the social capital. He leveraged. That's why you can see you can't afford to be an introvert. You can't afford to be. It's just me alone. You need. So social capital itself is one of the great capital you need. So we talk about financial capital, physical capital, um, social capital, yes, and we've talked about yes, human capital, social capital. Now we talk about intellectual capital. Now the other one, intellectual capital. You need intellectual capital. These are ideas or knowledge or patents, that can give you a competitive edge in your business. Ideas. That's intellectual capital. That's why we say you need to study a lot. You need to reach out to mentors. Mentor can give you idea. Mentor can be a social capital in your life. That can introduce you to partners. Mentor can give you idea, a singular idea of how to simplify your processes, just like Henry Ford did. Simplifying, making a linear processes of assembly of cars. That's eventually become the standard for other vehicles. So ideas, intellectual capital. It can be knowledge, it can be ideas, it can be somebody can give you an idea, or it might be as you are studying. So that can be a capital on its own, intellectual capital. Ideas that can give you a competitive edge ahead of your competitors. You can read it in a book, like I said. You can get it from mentors. You can get it in a program. You can get it from training. You can get it from what we are teaching like this. That's why you need to continue to learn. That's why I say the more you know, the better it is for you. Your business, as a business person, one of the greatest important or most important thing you need is knowledge, intellectual capital. You need to keep learning, because it learning simplifies a lot of hard not for you. So some stagnation that a lot of business people have been stagnated today. It has stagnated because they last level to which they know once they break through in knowledge, they break through, a break free in their business. So that's what it is. That's what it is. So I've talked about the financial capital, talked about um, physical capital, I've talked about human capital, social capital, and intellectual capital. Because so put all those things together, you see that those who said all that you need is just financial capital is a lie. You need physical capital, machineries. People can lend you machineries. People can. You are a farmer. You can borrow a land. You don't need to buy the land. You can borrow a land, to use for what you want to do. You can borrow stuff you need to even show a product, to show a sample of what you are even trying to tell people. You what about human capital? Your skill is capital on its own. And in social capital, you need a network. Your influence can really be a capital to help you access partners, to help you access investors. And lastly is the intellectual capital, the ideas, the patents, the knowledge, the edge above and ahead of your competitors. So that's what we are for you today. And if you want to have any question, you can send it to us. That's which you think that is affecting your business. That's the reason why we say you need to learn. Your business will get stuck when you know little. The level to which you know determines how far your business will grow. Your growth is the spillover to the growth of the business. The more you know, the better it will be for your business. As you are growing, as you are scaling, that's when you need to know more. Because one mistake can crash the whole of the business. One mistake, if you are not very relevant in terms of knowledge, one can be outdated like many other companies. All right, see you tomorrow, day 20. It's gonna be fun. It's been fantastic. I'll continue with capital tomorrow, talking about alternative to capital tomorrow. My name is James Olokesusi. So once again, make sure you subscribe and like the video, and make sure you apply all that you are learning. Make a to-do list and begin to see how to appropriate all that you are learning. All right, don't forget, on Friday we're going to be at Ijaye at the Wealth Impartition Program. So if you are anyone in the nooks and cranny of Ijaye area, Ijaye, Lagos, make sure you can be. Number 3, Americana, if you are in Yanokbaja, Yabule Egba, even Oshodi, Songo, any area, Agege, Ikeja, you can just, it's on the express there, number 3 Americana Street. You can meet us there, very close. All right, see you tomorrow. Bye for now.